Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back, everybody. This is me, host Preacher Moss, the host of the ShOUT show. I literally want to take a moment to thank the people who contributed to my Facebook campaign to raise $1,000 to help children in need. This is a very, very important process that we're going through right now with COVID-19, which is this process that we have to rediscover who we are under stressful situations, who we are dealing with anxiety, who we are dealing with family members. So this episode, I thought would be really important to talk about what mental health looks like emerging out of what I've called affectionately the COVID-19 incarceration process. We are getting back to a space where we've been socially isolated from our social networks outside of our families. We haven't talked in some regards to our boss or our coworkers or the auxiliary people who are there, the people that clean up the office, the people, the janitors, the maintenance people. We're out of practice in a lot of regards with our social situations. Now, I come to this scenario and I bring this up as a core idea of the show, the fact that people have to understand that we're social creatures. We're social creatures, but we're social creatures because we're critical thinkers. And being in a space where sometimes an arena where you do critical thinking is removed. And when I say removed, meaning that you had no choice with it, meaning it was taken away. It's a scenario whereby people find themselves trying to find themselves. Let me explain. My background outside of doing stand-up is also I was a school teacher. I taught for quite a number of years, worked in youth services, also worked as a group home counselor. The children that I work with suffered trauma because they weren't in what's called regular education settings. And a lot of times that's a nice way of saying they didn't fit in what the normal mainstream program was. So when you get these kids that were coming to your classroom, they were dealing with being already isolated from the regular education process within the school. What you have now for us is that we are isolated from the regular process, and some people are have already been isolated. Now they're double isolated. When I say double isolated, it means you were already dealing with a certain set of issues, problems, and challenges. Now you find that arena that you would normally work those things out in are no longer there. Thus, the double. Now you have to create a formation, identity formation in both places. And this is really, really, really difficult. That's why I call this segment, Your Mind's Not Playing Tricks on You, dedicated to the Ghetto Boys. And shout out to Brother Scarface, who was affected by COVID-19. And hearts and prayers go out to that brother because he needs some love. He needs some support. But my point in talking about your mind's playing tricks on you is that your mind is not playing tricks on you. Your realities are the same. Your goals are the same. Your aspirations are the same. Your inspirations are the same. It's just that we have to look at different pathways to get to them. In past shows, we've talked about creativity. Yes, creativity. But creativity in this situation, brothers and sisters, is we have to learn how to cope. So your creativity has to be wrapped around a coping mechanism. Some of us have been in a house with family members. What you find out about your family members is that they're going through the same thing as you in terms of trying to find that space, isolated, because it's an interesting thing because in your family space, you have a family identity that works in the whole family dynamic. You have a particular identity that works within that space, in that particular ecosystem. And in that ecosystem, you have your own family geopolitics, if you will. But you work within that space. We have words that tell you that there's junior, which means there's always a senior. There's big mama, which means she's not big, it means she runs the house. Pop, and that's two dads. Nicknames, the whole idea of nicknames. This is an interesting process because that creates or that's in a particular space, but it's not a defined space. So you have nicknames you have when you're growing up. The idea is that we grow out of situations and we create new social situations, or we find ourselves in new creative situations, whether it's education, whether it's your job, whether it's religious situations. We find ourselves in these spaces, and all of a sudden, with COVID-19, they were wiped away. We were not allowed to engage in those spaces before fear of health issues and things like that. And to a man, I'll be honest, I think that we are rushing back into the situation a little bit too soon. Certain things are not there. The testing, the contact tracing, those things are not there. This is an economic push, and let's just say that. But whether it's an economic push or not, it still remains that one of the things that's not being talked about is the mental health of people who are returning to the workforce after going through what has been an unmitigated trauma. People are dealing with trauma, economic trauma, family trauma, health trauma, you name it, we got it. None of us has walked into a grocery store as of late and felt confident that everyone in the grocery store was free from COVID-19. None of us. When you go to the gas station, when you run into people, I literally look at people, and in my mind, I saw a guy cough. I was like, he's got it. I saw a guy drinking water. He missed his mouth. I have associated COVID-19 with not being able to carry out normal functions. Like I saw a guy basically miss a step off the curve, and he just missed a step. And in my mind, I was like, yep, that COVID's got him. My point, people, is while I'm joking, there are situations, scenarios that people have attached to COVID-19. They think that this is the right thing. Think of all of the anti-shelter-in-place protests that are going on. I don't mind the protests. You have a right to speak. I may not agree with you. You have a right to speak. But does it really require that you bring a firearm? Do you really need a firearm for shelter in place? This is important because I'm looking at these people's state of mind, if you will. And I'm like, why would you bring a firearm to a protest about staying at home? Leave the firearm at home, bring the protest, fine. Leave the firearm at home. We are in a fast pace. We are fast tracking, if you will. The idea to get people back into the workplace without appropriate measures in place to deal with folks' mental issues when they get there. And some of the mental issues, people will automatically go to, oh, it's depression, it's bipolar. Those are mental issues, but we're talking about aspects of grieving. Folks actually were grieving when they couldn't go to their workplaces because there was spots about these places were centers for social exchange. The Muslim community should probably look at it because we have a scenario where people have been, we're gonna hit them 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in a row. The shutdown of the masjids, that's number one. There's not going to be an Eid. There was no Taraweeh, it was Taramee. There's no Eid. There's no Eid celebration, no Eid prayers. We may not have, and I've said this before, we may not have any large live events until fall 2021. Think about that. We just went through a whole period of fundraisers online because we can't get together and meet. We can't conjugate. We can't, hang around and kick it around. You know what I'm saying? But my point is, what does that look like in the next 6 months? What does it look like in the next year? Because it will begin to dictate a lot of things. I don't know what Juma is going to look like. I'm imagining you're going to have to call ahead and get a reservation on the rug for Juma because you can't have a full masjid and then go 6 feet apart. Social distancing does not work. We are shoulder to shoulder, foot to foot people, and then we're talking about imaginary shoulders 6 feet apart, imaginary feet 6 feet apart, and that goes against all aspects of prophetic tradition in Islam. What does that mean? Like literally, what does that mean? There are a lot of guys who, a lot of believers who are old school. They live next to the masjid. And I went to visit a friend of mine, Mustafa Davis, in Istanbul, Turkey. And one of the most amazing things about his house was you would walk out of the house and there would be easily 4 masjids that you can go to, walking distance, walking distance. Can you imagine that you are in walking distance of a masjid and you can't go in over a period of time? We're not talking about the plumbing broke or the heating is out. We're talking about because of COVID-19, it shut down. Muslims are forced these days to reevaluate relationships because we have to put them online. We have to use technology to express ourselves. And that's not it. We're a technology connected community, but we are a face-to-face community for everything from prayer to counseling to fundraising to maintenance to just basic communication. We're oral tradition, and we're having to go through all these different types of technologies, if you will, to keep this thing real, to sustain it. And then there's the real aspect that before COVID-19 hit, people were dealing with issues of mental health. The economy was not all of what it said. There were people who were struggling. There were people who were, my gosh, man. I literally think about my grandfather and pioneers like that who would literally wake up, check this out, literally wake up knowing I'm going to work at least 2 jobs in a day. And at the end of the day, they knew it wasn't enough to feed their families. I mean, what kind of pressure is that? And then you just go and you show up for the next 25, 30 years. That's what my grandfather did. That's what my grandmother did. They literally lived their whole existence working for somebody, knowing that this is as good as it gets and it's not good enough. So I want us to let's do a self-check. Let's do our own mental wellness checks and be honest with yourself. If you're feeling some kind of way and you think that it's a little bit more than, oh, I'm just a little down, I got the blues, I'm melancholy, reach out to somebody. I don't want it to be a situation whereby we neglect the help that we need. There's a great quote I like to say, don't be afraid to be great. And I also say, don't ask for permission to be great. Well, don't be afraid to get help and don't ask for permission to get help. That would be the flip side of it. We live in a world that is framed in terms of people needing help as failing. That's something that has to be changed. People that need help to succeed. They don't need help to fail. When you don't get the help, that's when you see the failure. That's number one. Number two is there's evaluation that needs to be done about mental health, particularly in the Muslim community, because we deal with a plethora of things. We talk about religious extremes. We're talking about a world that says you can drink, you can do drugs, and then we tell everybody we can't, but we're surrounded by it. And it's the same way for other people. I don't want to talk about religion per se, just the idea that we have core values in some regards that may not match up with what everybody is trying to do. So when you look at it, it's like, okay, cool, I got it, I understand. But sometimes we don't always have it. Like I don't always have the answers. Like I don't always know. I don't always have the information. And that's okay. It's not a space of being vulnerable. No. It's a space of understanding that I have answers that could benefit me in a situation, or I could be lacking in information that could cause me harm, could cause me trauma, could cause me problems, if you will. And trying to find a delicate balance. You guys probably know this, but I would say as a comedian, I would say probably 75 to 80% of the comedy business, of the just comedian business, the ha-ha business that make you laugh, probably utilize mental health. They probably utilize mental health in terms of a therapist, in terms of counseling. And people say, why is that? Why is that? It's so high because your happiness is tied so much into people's approval. I talked about what happens in an interchange when people go on stage, that idea of hope, expectation, but it has to be wrapped around strategy. Mental wellness is the same thing. When you're not feeling well, you can't hope that you're just going to get well. You can't just expect you're going to get well. There has to be a strategy in place to move you from point A to point B. I'm saying this because I have been fortunate because I have people around me that check me to make sure that I'm okay. And if I'm not okay, I've had the love and support that I can go to someone and say, hey, listen, I'm feeling a certain way. Can you help me? One of the probably toughest times I ever went through was with the loss of my Aunt Ruth, um, who was my all in all. But my Aunt Ruth she was the matriarch of the family after my grandmother contracted Alzheimer's, advanced Alzheimer's. And she quit her job to work with my grandmother to be there 24 hours. And we didn't see the effect of what was going on. We couldn't really comprehend it because she made it seem like everything was all right. She did everything for my grandmother. She cooked for her. She bathed her. She cleaned her up. With her bowel movements. I mean, she did everything, and she did it religiously. And that pressure, we didn't understand what that pressure was. I mean, we did a little bit in terms of a family to provide a support, but we didn't see the pressure. And looking back, she died of a heart attack while working, doing volunteering at a food bank. And when I looked at it, I was like, my gosh, she was doing all of these things without support, without people checking on her, without people checking her to say, no, you're not going to do it. We're going to take care of mama today. And when I look back, I really had, these feelings of ambivalence because I'm like, it's a very rigorous process when you have to look at how your actions affect other people. And when she passed away, it was one of those things. Literally, I got back from London. I called her. It was Thursday. It's my day to watch grandma, to give her a break, to go to the food pantry to volunteer. I just got back from London. I was really tired. She told me, hey, don't worry about it. Just come out after Juma. You can watch mom, and I'll go back to the pantry. And I was the last I ever talked to her. I was on Highway 95 headed towards New Jersey. Got a call that she had passed away. And I think even today, I still have problems dealing with it. And that tells you that everybody is human. We're talking about a situation or incident that goes all the way back to 2014, and I'm still reliving it as I'm talking to you guys on this program. But these feelings are real. We're all vulnerable. This whole idea of trauma is a deep thing because we're so quick to want to bounce back from it. When my Aunt Ruth passed away, I was like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that. And I realized in looking back and reflecting, I was like, I was really hiding those feelings and trying to put them into different things. Like I took on this ridiculous workload in the idea of not having to deal with that pain that my aunt was no longer there. And when I say no longer there, I mean, she was there from the time I came into the world. And it was one of those relationships. That's real talk. But I want people to understand, don't be too quick to think that you have to rebound from trauma. They're not saying it enough in the news, but COVID-19 is a trauma. Everybody had to stop, pump their brakes, and reevaluate life as death was occurring around them on a daily basis. This is like a war zone. To now, at this point in time, what's going on, brother? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for coming on the show. At this point in time, when you talk about COVID, it's like a war zone. You're talking about people literally going to the hospital and not coming back. Folks having to watch janazas and funerals on iPhones and taping it, and that's the last recorded memory that you have. The inability of the family to comfort one another. Like, this is real trauma that's going on. I don't want people to underestimate the fact that, trauma is real. For lack of a better word, trauma is real. And I'm going to say something, and I'm going to put it into a sports analogy. In professional sports, your legacy as an athlete is not so much what you achieve. Contrary to what you hear. Your legacy in sports is based largely upon how well you were able to play with injury. How well were you able to play with injury? And let's be honest, a lot of us are injured. I wouldn't say traumatized, but we're injured. And every injury requires a certain amount of time for the injury to heal. And I don't mean to feel good or feel all right. I mean to fully heal. And we have to get back into the situation where we recognize injury, we recognize the fact that it takes time for injury to heal, and we can't jump out there when we think it feels all right. I'm going to test it. No, you have to let the healing happen. So this is something it's really been on my mind. So, wow, brother, I'm so sorry, man. May Allah accept his good deeds and forgive his bad deeds, give him the highest levels of paradise. But Abdul Wahab Muhammad, thank you so much for sharing it, but that's real. And we're not talking about it. You know, I think yesterday I was talking about the fact that this one Muslim funeral home in New York said they normally do 365 burials a year. The guy said they did 400 in a month. I mean, 400 in a month. Yeah, you know how ridiculous that is? I mean, we're losing more bodies than the war on drugs and black on black crime. And we only talking about a couple months. And people are rushing out. And I tell people, don't go back to work if you're not ready. When I say ready, I mean mentally, spiritually, and emotionally ready to go back into the workplace. You know, because I can imagine certain things are going to be wrong. Certain things have changed, how we connect to one another. People talking about we're going to rush back to work. They don't realize that this social distancing, they're putting tape on the floor, so that people have social distancing. Let me tell you guys something. When I taught severely emotionally disturbed kids, you know what I used to do? Because I was dealing with behavior management, I would tape boxes by their desks. And when they would come into classroom, before we started, everyone had to get in their box. And once we had the appropriate behavior, we'd sit down and we'd start instruction. That was behavioral distancing, social distancing. But now there are no boxes on the floor. Nobody's going to walk around with a tape rule to make sure that so-and-so is 6 feet away from me. It doesn't happen like that. Can you imagine going to a workspace and one of your employees, the one that always has a big smile on their face, they're no longer there. Maybe they passed away, maybe they're ill, they're no longer there. You're going to constantly have reminders of a situation, scenario that was traumatic and you could not control it. You couldn't control it. There was no pills, there were no therapies, there were prayers, but let's be honest, there was no active vaccination for COVID-19 and you couldn't control it. And one of the things that's going to be really, really deep is the fact that people will have a hard time understanding and accepting the fact that all this misery that came with COVID-19, they could do nothing about it. Your money didn't work, your connections didn't work, the amount of people you had on social media didn't work, nothing. You had to sit and you had to watch it play out. You had to literally sit and watch it play out. And in some regards, it's almost like stand-up. We never know as comedians how it's going to go when we go on stage. We can only hope and plan. The idea of a stand-up that goes, it went exactly according to plan, they're not being honest with you. They're not. We are people who find ourselves in the uncomfortable position of having to improvise. Improvise the realities that have been brought to our front door, and we have to take lemons and make lemonade. Or in some cases, you got to take lemons and make orange juice because there are no lemons. My point is, I wrap up, brothers and sisters, is 2 points. Number one, if you don't feel that you're ready to go back into work, don't come trying to run back to work knowing that you still have an injury. That's number one. Number two is don't be afraid to ask for help and don't ask for permission. Don't go into work asking and seeking their permission, not even from your own family. That space has to come from you. You have to have your own understanding of agency to treat yourself, or at least get you to a point or situation where you can get help. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Jasmine. So I won't hold you. You know why? Because it's Saturday. Yesterday was night of power for a lot of people. You're probably trying to catch up on some sleep. But these are just some things that were on my mind. I apologize in advance. They weren't necessarily funny, but sometimes for me, knowing a situation allows for me to have humor about it. So I'm probably going to get over here and I'm going to write some jokes and about some of the crazy stuff I heard, some of the crazy thoughts I had. I saw a baby throw a bottle, and I was like, I want to just Corona in it. Situations and scenarios because we're still trying to figure it out. And if there's anything that I can offer to everybody to make you feel good about it, I'm still trying to figure it out too. So as a sign off, remember what I always say: don't be afraid to be great, and don't ask for permission to be great. But I'm going to add to that. Don't be afraid to get help, and don't ask for permission to get help. Brothers and sisters, this has been a great time in the middle of a difficult time. And I ask everybody that this conversation, not to tell you, if you like it, press subscribe in the corner. I don't even know what the subscribe button is. Don't do that. If you get a chance, take this broadcast, share it with somebody, and have that conversation, because mental health is for some people, is a very unhealthy, uncomfortable conversation. Just the idea of asking people, hey, dude, you all right? You haven't done that before. Hey, dude, what you mean? We're all fine. I'm like, yeah, okay, all right, good. Don't be asking me no more. I'm like, dude, yeah, you good, you calm. But coming out of this situation, and I've said it before, I do believe we're coming out of it too quickly. The mental health preparation that they would have for a mass shooting or job loss or funerals, it's not there. And so I feel like emotionally, spiritually, people may be walking into a buzzsaw, which would be just as detrimental as having another spike from COVID-19, that people get out there and find out they're not ready. They're not healed. So I'm going to close out on that space. I appreciate you. Everyone have an incredible last couple nights of Ramadan. That's number one. Number two, for the people that tune in that are not Muslim, I appreciate you tuning in. This was about all of us. This was not about religion. This is about all of us. Please, people, if you're injured, wait till you're healed to get back in the game. All right. You guys take care. My name's Preacher Moss. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.